Cameron Stewart is the Australian's chief international correspondent. Cam, everyone in Australia who's waiting for a car or a sofa or even to fill up their car at the petrol pump has got a sudden new interest in Middle East geography. The Strait of Hormuz is a critical and only 33 kilometres wide body of water that Iran is saying it's now closed. It says it's going to sink any oil tanker that tries to get through the Strait of Hormuz. First of all, do you think Iran is actually capable of living out that threat?
I think they're certainly capable of doing it in the short term. I mean, it's literally off their coast. And so they would have short-range missiles that could definitely do that for sure, Claire, in the short term. I think probably the bigger question is what non-Iranian ships would risk sending their ships through there at this point. Iran reportedly set a tanker on fire just 24 hours ago with one of its missiles. So I think really, and we've seen actually in the past few weeks, as the tensions have built between the US and Iran before they actually attacked Iran, the number of those ships going through the strait dwindled. So it's, if you like, it's self-preservation at the moment. So even if Iran couldn't sink every ship that went through, it doesn't mean they'll go through because they won't take the risk.
Already oil and gas prices are going through the roof. It's going to obviously add to cost of living pressures throughout the rest of the world. Australians are already worried about their travel plans. The entire Middle East aviation system has shut down.
Due to the airspace restrictions and changing dynamics at this airspace right now, we have been advised by the company to return back to Doha. For now, please remain seated and follow.
We don't have any flights at the moment. Airspace is closed.
Oh, wow. That's meant the cancellation of thousands of flights. For Australians here, Cam, who are worried about all of this and the impact that it's going to have on their day-to-day lives, do you think this will be sorted out in the next few weeks or next few months, or is this going to be a new reality for years to come?
It'll certainly be not for years to come. It'll certainly be the reality in the short term. I mean, we're going to see impacts on oil prices. We've already seen them. On gas prices, we'll see impacts on world stock markets with confidence rising or falling depending on how the conflict plays out. And of course, in the very short term, Claire, it's a disaster for Australians who are travelling because the Middle East hub there through with the airlines like Qatar and Emirates and Etihad and Qantas as well. I mean, the Middle East really is the way Australians get to and from Europe these days. It's the main hub. So it's a disaster for people who are travelling. It really is, who are stuck there, stuck in Europe, stuck in Australia, have travel plans they've got to recalculate. And the interesting thing is that while those airlines are desperate to get back off the ground and back into the air, very difficult to do that in any numbers when there's still uncertainty about whether Iran will actually continue their attacks on these Gulf states, which of course they did when the conflict began on Saturday.
On the western side of the Persian Gulf, just above the Strait of Hormuz, are 7 monarchies that until now have been assumed to be relatively neutral in the Middle East conflict. That's Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Qatar, the United Arab Emirates, Oman, and on the other side of the peninsula, of course, is Jordan. They are all now under attack from Iran. Has Iran made a terrible mistake by drawing those countries in?
Look, I think Iran has made a miscalculation here. What Iran wanted to do, in fact, it's actually stated this, is it claims it was going to attack only US facilities in these Gulf states, because of course these Gulf states do house US troops, sometimes they house warplanes, etc., etc. And Iran said they would target that. Next thing we saw, astonishing vision seen all over the world, of course, of luxury hotels in Dubai being hit, high-rise towers in Bahrain being hit, commercial ports as well being hit. I mean, infrastructure that really didn't have anything to do with the US. And this, I think, has been a real own goal by Iran, because what it's done instantly is it's really aligned these Gulf states against Iran, whereas they weren't really necessarily like that, Claire. They actually were the ones that were advising Donald Trump, or pleading with Donald Trump, do not attack Iran. In fact, they went so far as to say the US could not use their facilities to help attack Iran. So they were doing everything they could, diplomatically at least, to prevent the actual attack. And so they were pretty upset when they had missiles going into their hotels and high-rise buildings from Iran. In fact, they put a statement out just 24 hours after the attacks happened. 6 of the Gulf states got together in a council and they put out a statement saying, we deplore, we criticise this attack on us. You know, we were the ones who did not want this attack to start off in the first place, meaning the US-Israeli strikes, and we didn't let US use our facilities, and now you've still attacked us. You know, so I think for Iran's perspective, this is an own goal. This is something that will actually align the region against Iran and make it more diplomatically isolated than it already is.
We talked about travellers, but there are hundreds of thousands of foreigners living as expats in those states along the Persian Gulf. They're now obviously dealing with the terror of having missiles fly overhead, of landing in their neighbourhoods, and they're wanting to get home. They're complaining, some of them, that the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade has been slow to get in touch with them and that they don't know how they're going to get out. What do you think, Cam, about what's fair for Australians who are in those countries to expect? Should they expect that DFAT is going to get them all out, or is this part of the bargain when you go to live as an expat in a tax-free state like this?
Look, I think DFAT is overwhelmed from what we've heard so far, Claire. I mean, they basically say there are just too many. If you count the expats who live there, and also obviously people who are stranded, the travellers who are transiting through Dubai Airport, they say there's absolutely no practical way that we could get military planes, Australian military planes, for example, to bring people out of there. And so they're saying commercial flights are really the only option at the moment. And look, yes, I understand a lot of Australians, I think, are very frustrated by this. The Americans are actually having the same issue because only a few hours ago, the State Department urged Americans in 13 countries in the region to leave those countries immediately. So they clearly believe that the potential is here for Iran to continue to attack these Gulf states. I'm not so certain about that. I think that Iran may soon curtail those attacks, realising that it is going to be a bit of a diplomatic own goal. But at this point in time, it's very hard to know how it will pan out because the Iranian foreign minister, interestingly, yesterday made the claim that, in fact, there were rogue elements of the Iranian military that were firing on these Gulf states. In other words, the command and control in Iran, because of what's happened, is not cohesive enough to guarantee that they won't randomly fire shots at these Gulf states. Now, who knows in war whether that's a true statement or whether it's spin? We don't know, but it's a hugely confused situation.
There is an alternative route for the Persian Gulf states to get their oil and their goods to the rest of the world, and that's the Red Sea. Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates both have pipelines that would enable them to embark their oil at the Red Sea and then send it around the world. The problem in the Red Sea is that there's an Iran-backed militia, the Houthis in Yemen, who are saying they're going to fire on shipping. We've seen in the past that the Houthis were able to completely disrupt world trade, Cam, back when this war with Israel started raging in the first place. What do you think is going to happen now?
Well, the Houthis are interesting because as one of the Iran-backed terror proxies in the region, they said they would fight alongside Iran if Iran was attacked. Iran has been attacked. They have not yet announced that they are going to fire missiles and actually join the fight, but they have announced rhetorical solidarity with Iran. They've said it's disgraceful what's happened, and they're fully in support of them, but they haven't fired a shot as yet. I think the next 48 hours will be really instructive as to whether the Houthis are going to join this battle or not. Remember that Hezbollah in Lebanon waited 48 hours before they fired their first shots in support of Iran. And just a few hours ago, we've heard that some pro-Iranian militia in Iraq have fired shots at US bases. So Iran's proxies are slowly gearing into action. And the Houthis, we don't know whether they're going to join, but it would be really interesting because if they do join, Claire, to stop that shipping in the Red Sea at the point when the Straits of Hormuz are already closed, you know, you really are going to cause chaos in world trade if that's the case. And that's the sort of the deep breath moment we're waiting for as far as the trade and the Houthis are concerned in the next 24, 48 hours.
When these big international dramas happen, Cam, it's your job to write analysis that explains it for the rest of us. I've loved some of your analysis pieces since this war began, and we all scrambled into action on Saturday night. In one of them, you talked about Israel as the new superpower. What do you mean by that?
The decapitation of the Iranian regime from the Ayatollah supreme leader and, according to Trump at least, up to 50 of senior leaders, and the obvious military superiority that Israel now has over Iran really has enshrined it as the superpower of the Middle East. And the great irony of this, Claire, is that this has occurred really through a series of mistakes by Iran ever since the October 7 massacre of Israelis by Hamas in 2023. From that point on, Iran's proxies, that was a crazy move by Hamas. It ended up in the destruction of Gaza and effectively the destruction of Hamas as a coherent fighting force. Then the other Iranian proxy, Hezbollah, joined the fight against Israel with lobbing bombs and missiles into northern Israel for over a year until Israel comprehensively routed it through a whole series of moves, including the assassination of Hezbollah's long-standing leader. And then Iran, I think, had too much hubris and overconfidence and launched some assaults on Israel that were very, very unsuccessful, with Israel shooting down almost every missile that came its way. And then, of course, last June, we had the joint Israeli-US strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities, and Iran was very toothless in its response to that. And now we've had a situation where, in the lead up to this conflict, knowing that Donald Trump had sent 2 aircraft carrier task forces to the region, Iran was still belligerent in its in negotiations, refusing to give concessions on its nuclear program or its ballistic missile program, which were the demands the Americans were making. And now we've seen this happen. And so through a whole series of missteps orchestrated by Iran since October 7, Israel, almost by de facto status, is now the Steve Bradbury of the Middle East. It is the superpower of the Middle East.
We've talked a little bit on the front before, Cam, about how in the October 7, 2023 attack, Hamas, and therefore Iran, which funds Hamas, achieved exactly what they wanted, that is to make Israel a pariah on the world stage. In Western capitals, in Sydney and Melbourne and Brisbane, Westerners were marching in protest against Israel. Do you think now that the war has widened to Iran, the Gulf, the United States, that is going to ease and we're going to see kind of less anti-Semitism, less critique of Israel itself?
I think the Palestinian-Israeli question is almost a bit of an isolated question in the minds of many people. I mean, we've seen a lot of the protesters, a lot of the anti-Israeli and anti-Semitism here in Australia, for example, really focus almost entirely around that conflict. We didn't see these protesters come out early on when Iranian dissidents were being slaughtered in the streets. So I think that is a slightly separate issue to the broader Middle East conflict. And it's really interesting, isn't it? At the moment, you've got anti-Iranian regime protesters now on the streets celebrating the death of Khomeini and actually thanking the US and Israel for this behaviour. So we really do have some interesting splits in the Islamic community between Palestinians and Iranians about these conflicts.
Cameron Stewart, thank you very much.
Pleasure.